Hey everyone, this is Louis7 and it has been a while, but I have another patch news video for the Lord of the Rings Online. And today we are going to cover update 30.3, which has a lot of things coming, but the two most notable things are the Brawler class and Legendary Items revamp. This is also probably the closest thing we can get to an expansion pre-patch in LOTRO, and this is of course for Gundabad. This update will be releasing on Wednesday, October 13, 2021. And the maintenance will start at 8 AM Eastern, and I don't know if they've actually announced the end time, but usually it is either 12 PM Eastern or shortly before that if they get it done early. There are, of course, other exciting things than the Brawler and Legendary Item revamp, but let's go ahead and go into some more details on the Brawler to start off. So the Brawler is going to be a new melee class that has two specs that you can actually spec into. You have the red line and blue line, and then the yellow line is going to be just supplemental traits. The red line is more DPS oriented, while the blue line is more tank oriented, but the Brawler has a lot of support type abilities and themes going on with it. So it is definitely not just a straight DPS class. If you're interested more in the gameplay and my thoughts on the class, I'll link a video below, and I will probably actually do a live review of the Brawler after a few days have passed. But moving on with the Legendary Items revamp, this is going to be a completely new ally system. We are going away from the old non-imbued allies, old imbued allies, and we are moving to this new Legendary Item system. And there are a lot of things to unpack there, so won't focus on it too much in this video, but essentially with the ally revamp, it should be easier to get the baseline power level of your ally up. But there still will of course be a lot of customization and definitely still some grind involved in getting your ally actually maxed out. But again, it's going to be a lot easier to just get the flat baseline power level up because all you need to do is reforge every few levels. Some quick additional details on the ally system include that you will get one set of 2 allies in the system, but you can of course go ahead and get more sets if you want for different specs. That is entirely up to you, if that is how it works out for building your character. But the point is, you don't have to replace allies every few levels. You don't have to worry about the imbuement system or anything like that. It's just going to be one set of allies that will progress with you from all the way starting at level 50 all the way to the level cap and beyond as more expansions and updates are released, unless they revamp it again at some point. To progress the new allies, as I mentioned, you reforge them every few levels, but it's also a modular type system where you will slot traceries in, and traceries you will outlevel them eventually, so you'll just replace them as you level up. Traceries do have rarities that can highly impact their power level and their effect, and there can also actually be upgraded via enhancement runes to increase their item level, so there is some complexity there involved with upgrading the ally and the items in it with the traceries. Traceries themselves function a lot like all the old items in the old system, so they kind of have the effect of things like relics and legacies, but they're all one system now. But yeah, that is just a basic overview of the new Legendary Item system that we are getting in this update, which is 30.3. Again, like the Brawler, if you want more details, I'll surely have a video on it in the near future, and I've covered a lot from the beta, but we'll actually see during the patch how it turns out. Moving on, there are a lot of class changes, partially because the Legendary Items revamp is going to have huge implications on balance and just class power in general in LOTRO, especially because of some of the changes from old legacies that certain classes had, like champions. Their old allies and imbued allies and their legacies just made them insanely powerful, compared to if they didn't even have those allies, they'd be kind of weak. So a lot of that type of crazy stuff and crazy scaling type stuff has been toned down or just gotten rid of. So they have done some balance changes to classes again, like the champion, to adjust that, but they have also made some other changes. I won't go too in depth in this video. I'm thinking about doing another video on the class changes in general in the future, so let me know if you're interested in that. But to go ahead and broadly cover what we do have, I already mentioned champion. Their baseline damage is getting buffed, and they have a few additional changes, especially to the amount of healing some of their cooldowns do. But they have, in the Legendary Items revamp, lost a lot of power with certain legacies, just to point that out. Moving on, hunters don't have many changes besides just some, of course, balancing tweaks, which I believe have been applied to basically every class with the ally revamp is kind of insane with all the effects and kind of trickle-down effects it has to each of the classes and the changes there. But anyway, moving on, there are minor changes to the Runekeeper. Loremaster actually has quite a few quality of life type changes. I believe he can use some debuffs while on the move now, and some other general changes and bug fixes. Moving on, there is actually one line of notes for the Warden. It's actually very notable because the quick sweep trait was an RNG element for Redline Wardens. It was in the Redline, but you could actually get it in the other specs. But the point is, that was a very heavy RNG element that many Wardens, such as myself, did not like, even if I liked the effect of that. So while the RNG element of that has been reduced, you can get a 100% quick sweep or bleed sweep proc chance. But now the damage of it is going to be a lot less. How much less, I do not know because the patch is not out yet at the time of recording this video, but it will be interesting to see if that is a mechanic still worth participating in as a Warden. Moving on, there are 2 more points about classes, combat, and that type of stuff in general. And actually, this one has to do with weapon swapping. That has been disabled while in combat, so you can no longer swap weapons in combat. You can, of course, swap weapons out of combat, and you can swap between different allies, potentially, for different specs you have. But the actual act of swapping weapons in combat has been disabled, and that will have pretty big effects on some classes like the Champion Hunter. Even I know Warden do a lot of that, even though I didn't participate in weapon swapping, and personally I never actually liked that mechanic. It doesn't seem like something that should belong in LOTRO. But the point is, wherever I was going with that is that there are, of course, balance and class power level implications for people that did weapon swap. Moving on, the next change is because of the LI system. And for landscape mobs, at least most of them according to SSG, disarming from them has been disabled, so you can no longer be disarmed on landscape. Now, there were some important notes in certain instances, raids and things like that. They have not been able to remove all the disarming that there is in LOTRO, so you could potentially get disarmed still. And the reason disarming is so bad with the new system is and there were situations where disarming you would remove like a giant portion of your morale, and that was obviously no good because then you could just be killed really easily just because you were disarmed instead of just like preventing you from using abilities and having no weapon temporarily. So there are a lot of bad side effects from the new LI system with disarms, and that has been disabled on a lot of landscape mobs, which honestly is kind of a quality of life thing. Disarming has never been a fun mechanic to me personally in the game. Moving on, there is a pretty big change to houses, and this has been a long-awaited update by the housing community, and they are consolidating a lot of the hooks. I personally don't do too much with houses, so I honestly don't know too much what is going on here, but they're consolidating, as I said, a lot of the interior hook types into a smaller subset of hook types. So the point of this is to give players, I believe, greater flexibility in, it says here actually, give players greater flexibility in decorating their homes the way they want without being as limited by the sizes of hooks in their homes. So a lot of different types of furniture hooks, for example, have turned into just generic furniture hooks, and it's kind of similar with wall hooks and floor hooks. So while I don't even personally own a house in LOTRO anymore, I am sure a lot of people who are into housing and decoration in the game will appreciate this stuff because it sounds good to me even. Moving on, there actually is a pretty notable change that I did not hear any announcement about or any excitement about from SSG, and that they finally have been able to deactivate set bonuses when you level past the effective level of an item set. So this has caused a lot of perhaps negative changes, at least a lot of players seem to think they're negative. When for a while you would outlevel like raid sets that would have set bonuses, armor sets like that, you would just still get the effect. So something that would happen is high level players, I think this was pretty common, maybe even Mordor a little bit higher, or before then you would wear actually a low level raid armor set just because the set bonus was so powerful. So eventually Standing Stone Games started to add a level cap to a lot of armor sets, so you couldn't just wear them at all at higher level, and they even removed the set bonuses of some things, and I believe they might even have removed whole items because they couldn't get it to work or whatever. But it sounds like they have finally gotten it to where set bonuses themselves will be deactivated when you outlevel that, so you can still equip some of the low level armor but just not get the set bonus effect. And that sounds like a great thing to me moving forward, and hopefully we can get some of that old stuff back for when you actually are in that level range. You could actually take advantage of that set bonus that was intended for that level range and content with whatever set bonus that content era applied to. But anyway, moving on from that, there's also going to be a change to Essence Reclamation Scrolls. They will be converted to these things called Retired Essence Reclamation Scrolls, and you might be guessing why, because they have been retired. Actually, they have not been retired. They are just being called that. So they are going to be disenchantable with the Flame of Encalamir. And by disenchanting, you will get an Essence or Tracery Reclamation Scroll selection box. So now you can actually select either an Essence Reclamation Scroll or a Tracery Reclamation Scroll. And you might remember Traceries, they are going to be very important. They are items in the new LI system, and they function very much so like Essences. So now your Essence Reclamation Scrolls can be used in that. You first have to disenchant them, and then you could select a Tracery Reclamation Scroll. Personally, I probably won't use that too much because you'll often want to just overwrite your old traceries, but there is the potential that you might want to take one out, reclaim it, and perhaps send it to an alt, because a lot of this stuff is account bound, which I personally think is a good thing with the system. But moving on, they do have one note in the items section on the Valor level boost. They now give appropriate legendary items for the revamp. And speaking of legendary item revamp, a lot of the old sources of LIs are now completely gone, but this is something I'm kind of surprised, and I am very glad that Standing Stone Games admitted this. There might be some situations where you actually do acquire old LIs where they didn't actually get them removed before this update. The reason I'm happy they mentioned this is because I feel like there are going to be things they either just forgot or didn't have time to actually remove with how rushed it seems like this LI revamp is being. And I just feel like a lot of players would have actually found these old LIs and then made a bunch of complaints or posts about how they were supposed to be removed, so at least they admitted it ahead of time. So you might still run into actually some old LIs in various sources. Now, a lot of the big sources have been disabled that you can't get them, such as Skirmish Camp. That one was specifically pointed out. Moving on, there's actually not too much left. There are some notes about the legendary servers. Essentially, this has to do with the landscape difficulty slider that's available on Shadowfax and Treebeard. Basically, what would happen is if you switch difficulties, especially between normal, tier 1, tier 2, or if you want to think about it how I do, tier 1, tier 2, and tier 3, you could potentially lose some of the difficulty deeds, especially if you switched before level 10 when it didn't actually state that that could actually cause an issue. Basically, the way it used to be said is that after you actually accepted the difficulty and got started with that deed, then going down on a difficulty could prevent you from actually completing the higher tier difficulty deeds, and now it will actually let you know that. Alright, I feel like I confused myself there enough, so hopefully I didn't confuse you all, but moving on, there is a note with PvMP free players have become a little bit stronger because of the legendary items revamp and all the new stuff with that, so monster players are getting a little bit of a buff to compensate for that and hopefully keep things a little bit in balance. Moving on, there is a little bit of notes on the quest and adventure areas, but these are mostly bug fixes and very minor changes, notably in Xanabalzar, and I believe, yes, just some other bug fixes, text fixes, things like that. Alright, so for the last section of this patch review, we have the known issues, which is actually quite a long list. Again, I am glad that Standing Stone Games is actually admitting these issues and talking about them. I believe that's better than us just being kind of wondering if Standing Stone Games even knows about these things or not. But apparently there's something with the Brawler where metal should slowly reset to a base value of 3, and that is not functioning. Metal is decaying to 0 at this time. I did not actually know that was a bug. I just assumed that's how the class works, so now we know it's actually a bug. Also, one thing you might run into with the Brawler is a lot of quest and barter vendors just won't have Brawler appropriate gear. That is said in the known issue, so it does sound like they intend to fix that and actually add that stuff for the Brawler in the future, but for now, you might just not find that much Brawler stuff. There's also a note, we already covered PvMP, but there's a known issue apparently that legendary items have scaling issues in Ettenmoors. I have no idea why or how this would be, but yeah, you might run into something weird with scaling, I guess, in PvMP and the Ettenmoor specifically. I don't know if this doesn't take place in Osgiliath, because that is another PvMP map, but I'll stop talking about PvMP now, because that's about the extent of my knowledge there. But yeah, next up on the list actually has to do with the legendary item system, and the UI for it is, I really wish I could sugarcoat this or say some other way, but it's just horrible. And basically no good, but they actually have notes on this in the known issues that tracery titles and descriptions don't fit cleanly in the panel, and that is entirely true. Also, the location of the unslot button in the UI can cause confusion, and that is also true. So this button unslots the tracery listed above it and not below it, even though it seems more natural that it would be the one below it. That does cost Mithril coins, and I'm not sure I quite recommend actually unslotting a tracery via Mithril coins. That seems like a total waste of Mithril coins. Yeah, it's something I wouldn't really recommend too much, but if you do try to do that, at least know that it works this way, that it unslots the tracery listed above and not below. Continuing on with the LI system, some tooltips can be too long to be viewed fully on lower resolutions. Also, funnily enough, on higher resolutions, I have noticed that the panel to actually work with your LI doesn't even stretch down far enough to see it all if you do happen to have a higher resolution screen. Mine is vertical-wise 1440p, but that is not listed in the known issues here. Continuing with the legendary items, it does note that some instances and raids aren't dropping the new legendary item loot yet. I keep saying this update seems like it has been rushed and just rushing to actually get it released in a somewhat finished state, and I think this particular note really highlights that they haven't even added the new legendary item loot to a lot of instances and raids, unfortunately. There is one final known issue for Minstrel. So rank 2 of the Minstrel Triumphant Spirit cooldown, that trait is not actually properly reducing the cooldown of the skill. For any Minstrels who have that trait and seem like they're running into issues, that's because it does appear to be a bug. But alright, that is all I have for this patch review. There are actually quite a bit of details that I did not expect to be getting to today, but again, the big things, LI revamp, a lot of details there actually. And the second thing is the Brawler, or depending on how you're excited about them, maybe the Brawler is the top thing for you in this update. There is, of course, for the housing decorators, the hook consolidation, which seems like it is a pretty big thing because it's been kind of hyped up for a while, relatively hyped up at least. Also, a lot of class changes and then just a whole bunch of various things is what it seems like with this patch. But as far as this video goes, I hope you all enjoyed it and hope you learned something useful. And if you did, please consider liking and subscribing for more or becoming a channel member to support the content. And thanks for watching, everyone.